Tonight is the fourth and last of our lessons on the art of the lost art. I think is what Dewey called it, the lost art of listening. And while the emphasis has been on listening in this class, actually listening is just a vehicle. The point of the class, the ultimate desire of the class, is to create understanding. And that through creating understanding in relationships, we make deeper, better, more meaningful connections with one another. And as we've talked about, maybe in every class when we got together, there are so many times that misunderstandings creates distance instead of creating closeness. And so my hope, again, is that through the class, you're not just a better listener, but that you truly do become agents of reconciliation, agents to make peace in the world that has so much tension, especially right now. Okay? So our lesson thought for tonight, the first thought I want you to contemplate is that we first seek to understand and then, that we seek first to understand and then to be understood. Okay? So what difference do you think this approach would make in your relationships? If rather when you get into a conversation, a discussion, an argument, a fight with your wife, with your children, with whomever it might be, rather than your goal being, I want to make sure they understand what I'm saying, that your goal becomes, I want to first understand him or her. What do you think, what difference do you think that approach would make in your relationships? A lot smoother? Why? What would make it smoother? Wouldn't be so much confusion? Others, what difference do you think it would make?
It would make me so defensive.
All right, it would break down some of the defensiveness that naturally comes when there's tension or disagreement. Someone else?
Teach me a lot of patience.
Okay, teach a lot of patience. Yeah.
Because me and my husband, we have communication problems. We don't communicate very well.
And so it would help communication a great deal. In fact, what I've noticed is that when people feel listened to, they relax. Okay. Oftentimes, when we're in an intense conversation, we're uptight. Okay, we're ready to pounce. When someone feels valued and respected enough to be listened to, they relax. And when they feel listened to, guess what then they oftentimes are ready to do? Listen to you. Okay? So it can make a great deal of difference in our relationships. So let's talk about a tool that is often used by professional counselors. It's something that it was one of the first things I learned when I began the counselor path, and that is the skill and ability of reflective listening. Now, I want to tell you this part of it before I get into talking about what reflective listening is. When I started my master's program in counseling, here's how different it was for Laurie. I would come home and I'm learning all these skills, how to listen well and how to reflect back and pick up the feelings and what's really going on. Really trying to understand my wife, trying to practice these things I'm learning. And here's the reaction I get. I want you to quit counseling me. I said, I'm not counseling you. I'm trying to understand you. Okay? And so here's the reality. If you haven't had a great reputation as somebody who's a good listener, and you start trying to practice being a good listener, the reaction of people in your life may be, are you trying to be my therapist? You know? Because we're so unaccustomed to people actually making the effort to listen. Okay, so be prepared for that and be okay with that and explain that this is a desire on your part to try to understand. So reflective listening. What is reflective listening? Anybody want to give it a shot of definition here?
So counselors always say, so what I'm hearing you say is.
Yeah, they reflect back, reflective listening, they reflect back what they have heard. And there are essentially three pieces to it. And I'm going to, develop this even more to one, what's the person feeling? Number two, why is the person feeling it? And number three, what does the person want? Okay, I'm going to break that down a little bit more and give a little more substance to it in just a moment. But good listening is hard. It's hard work. All right? Interesting thing has happened over the years as I've done premarital counseling. It's almost inevitable that a young couple comes in and they have at least one issue that they haven't been able to tackle in their relationship. They haven't been able to work through it. And so even though they're looking forward to getting married and they're looking forward to be husband and wife, they still haven't figured out how to resolve this one issue. Typically, when I teach them how to listen to one another, by the time the session is over, they have resolved an issue that's been plaguing them for 6 months. That's the value of listening. And so, when we talk about the elements of listening, here's the communication part of it. Here is assertive language, but the listening is just the reverse side of this. Okay? The reflective listening is just the reverse of this. So what I often try to teach is how to communicate, to be understood, and how to listen to understand. All right? So a person will say, I feel. Now, what part of us, remember our three circles? Heart, mind, and soul? What part of us is talking when we say I feel?
Heart.
The heart. That's right. What part of us is talking when we get to the because? The mind. And what part of us is talking in the what I want? So one left. Thank you. All right. Now, I said earlier in the class that a lot of times males in particular are out of touch with our heart. We have feelings. We really do, ladies, okay? We really do have feelings. We just don't know where they are or what to do with them, okay? But with a little help, we can learn. I mean, give me some feeling words. Give me some feeling words.
Hurt.
hurt, confused, angry, happy, sad. Keep going. Joyful, depressed. With a little help, most of us can get in touch with what's going on in our heart. What we don't want to say is, I feel like. Okay?
I just started saying, like, I could kill you.
Okay?
I'm just kind of dramatic, but I don't mean that, but I'm just.
I appreciate that you don't mean that. I'm very thankful that you don't mean that. When I say don't use the word I feel like, here's what I mean. When I say I'm angry, or when I say I'm happy, or when I say I'm sad, or when I say I'm depressed, you're able to identify a feeling. When I say feel like, I'm trying to draw a word picture for you to understand. But word pictures don't always communicate well. Let me give you an example. If I said to you, I feel like running around the building, what am I feeling? I may feel energetic.
You may be wanting to escape.
I may what?
You may be wanting to escape.
I may be wanting to escape. I may be angry. I may be frustrated.
Anxiety.
I may be anxious. I may be joyful. That's a lot of different kinds of emotions. So again, when you say I feel like, it's an effort to draw a word picture to describe a feeling, but it doesn't always hit the target. So you need to be able to say, okay, what is it that I'm really feeling? And say that. Okay? I'm feeling anxious. I'm feeling depressed. I'm feeling afraid. I'm feeling upset. I'm feeling happy. I'm feeling relieved. I'm feeling relaxed. Whatever the feeling is. So most people can be taught that. Here, the second part is where we often blow it. You need to identify instead of interpret. This is where a lot of us think that we are mind readers and heart readers. Give you for instance. Laurie says to me, Dale, I don't like it that you go to bed so early. So I might reflect back to that and say something like, well, you feel sad because, I'm trying to think how to say it in a wrong way, because I know what would be the right way. You feel sad because you don't want to be alone. That's probably not it, okay? What often we do is we interpret people's motivations for what they do. Let me give you a better example. That wasn't a very good example. Let's say that Laurie is late from work. I'm expecting her on a Wednesday night. I'm teaching class, so I need to have her home so we can eat and we can leave at 6:30 and be here to teach class. And rather than showing up at a time that enables us to do that easily, she doesn't show up at all. She doesn't call. And I don't know what's going on. Okay? What might I be feeling in that situation? Fear, anger, worry. What if I what if when she finally called me after class tonight, okay, let's just carry this out. She calls me at 8:15 tonight, and I begin to interpret what happened. And I say something like this. I am really angry. Okay, I got the first part. I'm angry because you absolutely have no consideration for anybody but yourself. Now, what have I just done? I interpreted why she was late. Do I know why she was late? No. What's she automatically going to do? She's going to become defensive. And when we become defensive, here's what often happens. Amy, you got a Bible with you? Okay. Here's what we start into. This is the crazy 8 I won't get into. Will you hold the Bible up? Because I'm going to try to hit you. Okay. And you better, because I'm pretty good, so you better be ready. All right. All right, so she does that. I start bringing up my Bible and I start defending when she has this. How much communication is going to take place in that situation?
Not very much.
But that's what happens in relationships, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay? People start going on the attack, start being defensive, nothing is accomplished. And in large part, it's because we have interpreted rather than identified behavior. Okay? I could have said to Laurie in that situation I gave to you, I was angry and concerned because you didn't get home when I expected you to. That's a little different approach, isn't it?
Yeah.
I didn't interpret it. I identified what happened. Okay? And then I could go on to say what I would have liked to have happened is for you to give me a call to let me know what's going on. Right?
No, she could have said, could you have joined the whole world? And get home?
What do you do with students who create problems? All right, so I hope you see how, again, these first 2 parts work. But this is where people often get stuck. They get upset and they start interpreting behaviors instead of identifying behaviors. The last part, oftentimes people never even get to. They get stuck in this attack and defend, attack and defend, attack and defend mode. They never even talk about what they each want. And here's the interesting thing. With a little help and they finally move to the point where they talk about what they want, they both want the same thing. But they never get that far to talk about it. Okay? So reflective listening is a tool to help people identify what's going on in the heart, what's going on in the mind, what's going on in the soul. This is actually, should be this way. This is actually the soul, because this has to do with our rules. The mind is the one that says, a wise person is the one that says what I want. All right? So give me an example or two of bad questions.
What's wrong with you?
Good.
What are you thinking?
Good. Man, David, are you experienced at this?
I may have said both of those yesterday.
Okay. Those are great examples. Give me some other bad questions that don't produce very much connection or understanding. What are some other bad questions? Are you crazy? Yeah. Give me some more.
It's not necessarily a question, but it's I told you so.
Told you so. Doesn't help very much in understanding. Hey, believe me, you've got some in your reservoir, okay? So what are they that you come up with?
What's your problem?
What's your problem?
Are you out of your mind?
Are you out of your mind?
Why don't you express your feelings?
Why don't you express your feelings? Why do you always mess things up? Anytime you use always or never, it's probably not a good question. Okay? those are examples of questions that we may ask that don't lead to understanding. So I want us to turn to Jeremiah chapter 7. I want you to get a little biblical perspective here as we talk about these human interactions and relations. I'd like somebody to read that, please, and if you could read it either from the screen or from your Bible, or if you've got an electronic source, that's fine too.
I can do it.
Okay?
Therefore thus saith the Lord God, behold, my anger and my fury shall be poured out upon this place, upon men, upon beasts, and upon the trees of the field, and upon the fruit of the ground, and it shall burn and shall not be quenched. Thus saith the Lord of the hosts, of the God of Israel, take your burnt offerings unto your sacrifices and eat flesh. For I spake unto you, your fathers, Lord, commanded them in the day that I brought them out of the land of Egypt, concerning burnt offerings or sacrifices. But this they commanded them, saying, obey my voice, and I will be your God. And ye shall be my people, and walk ye in all the ways that I have commanded you.
Okay. I want you to listen over the next few verses, what he says about listening. Okay, keep going.
That it may be well unto you. But they hearkened not, nor inclined their ear, but walked in the counsel, standing in the imagination of their evil heart, and went backward and not forward. Since the day that your fathers have forth out of the land of Egypt unto this day, I have even sent unto you all my servants, the prophets, daily rising up early and sending them. Yet they hearkened not unto me, nor inclined their ear, but hardened their neck, and they did worse than their fathers. Therefore thou shalt speak all the words unto them, but they will not hearken unto thee. Thou shalt also call unto them, but they will not answer thee. But thou shalt say unto them, this is a nation that obeyeth not the voice of the Lord their God, nor receiveth correction, truth and spirit, and is cut off from their mouth. Cut off thy hair, O Jerusalem, cast it away, take up limitations on high places. For the Lord has rejected and forsaken the generation of Israel.
What did Jeremiah say was the nature of the listening of the people of Israel? They didn't listen. They didn't listen. So here's the question. What can happen if you don't listen well? Based on what we just read.
Rejection.
You can become more stubborn and hardened in your heart and not listening well.
Rejection
Rejection from who?
from the Lord.
Rejection from God. What did you say, Gilda?
I said you could be cut off.
You can be cut off. What Jeremiah is pointing out, the Israelites had a history of rejecting God's prophets, except the ones who told them what they wanted to hear. Okay? And God said, if you're not going to listen to me, the consequence is you're going to be cut off. You're going to experience rejection. So if you don't listen well, if you make it a habit of not listening well, you can find yourself at odds with God. So it makes it, again, important to learn how to listen well. Well, what is asking good questions meant to accomplish?
I think in a lot of ways it's to help people with what verse 26 says. My people have not listened or even tried to hear. Asking questions means you're getting closer to listening than just hearing.
All right. It engages you in the conversation. It engages you in the relationship to ask questions. What else is asking questions meant to accomplish? It's meant to bring about understanding. Here's the reality that I referred to earlier. Many people are affected by lies in their life. I've had a conversation recently with someone who has lived by his or her a particular lie in his or her life for many years. When we talked about the truth, this person was able to identify the truth, but the truth was unfamiliar and uncomfortable. Even though the lie was eating this person's lunch. And so there's an old saying that I heard that I appreciated so much, and that is, it is easier to believe a lie that you have heard 1,000 times than it is to believe the truth you've heard for the first time. A lot of us have lies in our lives that we have embraced, because somebody that we trusted told it to us, or we just latched onto it somehow. And even though it is destroying our lives, we keep holding to it because it's familiar and it's comfortable, but we hate it. And the truth seems not right, even though it is the truth. So what does that have to do with asking questions? Well, here's what it has to do. The object of good questions is often to help people see things more clearly, which means asking penetrating and meaningful questions. Some people suffer from cluttered, confused, and congested thinking. And so reflection helps them hear what they are thinking, and asking good questions helps them think more deeply and more clearly. You see, rather than hand people the answer, it is good practice to help them get there and own it themselves through good questions. Which is more effective? If I say to you, what you've been thinking about yourself is wrong. Is that more effective, or is it more effective for you to come to the conclusion, wait a minute, what I've been thinking about myself is wrong? Which one is likely to have a greater impact? The second one. Why?
That's the question.
Because you came up with it yourself, not somebody
Yes.
telling you what to do.
There's an ownership that goes with that. Okay? There's an ownership that goes with that. So asking good questions oftentimes helps a person own, maybe for the first time, what it is that is being pointed out to them.
Dale?
You know, I'm thinking maybe I have a poor way of phrasing things. Sometimes somebody will say something and I'll say, really? Or do you think so? And that's because you almost come away feeling like they were the student in class wanting to have the right answer, and they know that wasn't it, but they don't know what you're asking them for, and you're confusing your student or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know I don't know how to say that better.
Okay, so I'm hoping that what we do tonight will help that. Okay. And you may be sitting here tonight and saying, oh, Dale, that sounds like a lot of psychobabble you're talking about tonight. It's not. Okay, you want proof? Have you ever considered how often Jesus answered questions with a question? And why did he do that? Okay, for instance, Jesus was asked one time, should we pay taxes to Caesar or not? Remember what Jesus' question was? Whose image is on the coin? He answered a question with a question. He said, give to Caesar what is Caesar's and give to God what is God's. For instance, he was asked on one occasion, what is the greatest commandment? Remember how he responded? What do you read? Well, it says, love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength. He said, well, you're not far from the kingdom of heaven. For instance, Pilate asked him, are you the king of the Jews? Remember what Jesus said to him? Is that your own idea, or did others tell you about it? He answered a question with a question. Now, why would he do that? To make people think, to help people come to a conclusion that they own, not to a conclusion that's necessarily handed to you. Okay? Sometimes we need people to hand us conclusions because we're struggling to get there. But if we own a conclusion ourselves, it is much more powerful in our lives. And that is why Jesus often answered questions with questions. Okay? It drove my children crazy, to do this at home. They'd say, well, Dad, I asked you the question. Okay? I know, but I'm trying to help you get there on your own. Right? And that helps people in understanding themselves better. So, again, the question we just contemplated was, why would Jesus answer a question with questions? First of all, I want to make this point that he is God and we're the ones who need to understand. Okay? But the other is to help people understand and own the conclusion for themselves. So let's talk about, and let's get practical with the types of questions that we can ask that would be most effective. And I hope that this is particularly helpful, Rita, as you've asked tonight. The first type of question we can ask is ask open-ended questions. It used to drive me crazy watching a sporting event after the game was over, and these people who were paid high dollars to go on TV, and the best that they can ask is yes, no questions. Are you glad you won? Yeah. Well, are you looking forward to next week's game? Yeah. I mean, can you do better than that? All right. Why are yes, no questions not the best kinds of questions? It's superficial and it often doesn't go anywhere. Okay? It kind of stagnates the conversation. It doesn't take it any deeper. So notice the difference here. A wife is asked, did you think berating your husband would endear him to you? That's a yes, no. Right? Notice the difference with this question. What were you hoping that talking to your husband like that would accomplish? See the difference between those two? What were you hoping that talking to him like that would accomplish? Now all of a sudden I see the error of my way, hopefully. Right? So that's asking open-ended questions. Second type of question is asking penetrating questions to motivations, to fears, to see honestly. Here's an example. You say that living a righteous life is the most important thing to you, yet you keep going to bars and home with strange men. It makes me wonder what really is most important to you. See how that gets a little into the depth of what's really going on? Okay? What's really important to you? All right? So you're asking penetrating questions. And the third is thought-provoking questions. Sometimes what I found with people is that we have narrow, boxed-in thinking. We can't see our choices or other possible decisions. We feel stuck. And we want people to think deeply about the consequences and implications and options that they have. And for instance, in Matthew 16, 13 through 20, Jesus asked his disciples, "Who do men say that I am?" That's a great question, because it forced them to kind of go and reflect, who do I really think he is? Am I with the crowds and my opinion of him? So let me give you an example of thought-provoking questions. You tell me that people seem to avoid you. They say you are judgmental and harsh, but you don't think you are. If you were in their shoes, what would you think about the things you say? Asking the person to think from another person's vantage point. Okay? All these kinds of questions. Oftentimes when my children would make poor decisions, I wouldn't tell them, "Here's what you should have done." I will say, "What'd you learn? What would you do differently given that same circumstance?" Okay? Again, the desire is to help people think more deeply about what they're engaged in and to take ownership of it. All right? So, the goal of such questioning is to guide people into truth. There's something about saying it yourself rather than having someone say it to you that enables you to own it. Now, generally, you want to look at people when you're talking to them and listening to them. You want to see how they look at you. What does it mean when there's no eye contact, when they have slumped shoulders, when they're red-faced, when they cross their arms, all these nonverbals? So just again, how can observing nonverbals help you as a listener?
Tell whether or not their words match, but they're nonverbal or something.
Wonderful. And so if I see that they don't seem to match,
Then you can call them on it in a loving way. But
Yeah.
say that you're excited about this, but your head's down, your shoulders are slumped, your body's telling you something else.
Doesn't science recently say 90% of communication is nonverbal?
well, what are we most apt to believe?
The internet. I wish that was a joke.
Okay, let me rephrase that question. Are we most apt to believe people's nonverbals or their verbals? Nonverbals, okay? Because sometimes we can say one thing, but our nonverbals sometimes give us away. Here's an example. I see your eyes begin to water every time you mention your dad, and I'm wondering what you're thinking. And that's paying attention to the nonverbals. What does it mean that your eyes get watered up every time we mention your dad? Good. But my point is, whatever the nonverbal is, it's an opportunity to listen, to understand more deeply. The two keys to understanding are listening well and asking good questions. And many times people will know the answers or directions that they should go in once they have had a chance to be heard. I said that last week. They will see themselves, they will see others, they will see God, they will see possible directions and solutions on their own. That's what you want to do through good listening.
Bill, I have a question real quick.
Yeah.
This may be completely off, but do you feel sometimes like when you're trying so hard to do like what you learn in class, that you're attacked by Satan even more because he doesn't want that, and so it makes it harder to do what you're trying to do? Does that make sense?
I think Satan looks for every opportunity to keep people divided and to keep us from being reconciled to God and to one another. So yes, he could
It
engage in
feels
that.
that way.
Yeah.
A lot of times when you try so hard, you become attacked more.
Yeah, because especially when we're starting out, because if he can get us to quit when we're starting out, we're not likely to go back and try that again. So yes, he will try to thwart anything good. So yes, there's a battle. So this kind of listening and asking questions can open people up to live more productive lives for God. Listening and asking good questions, building relationship, hearing them out, also earns you the right to confront. Okay? Sometimes what people need is not someone to sympathize with them. Sometimes what people need is to repent. The frustrations in their lives, the problems in their lives is not because people are not listening to them. The problem is they haven't repented. They haven't turned from the direction they're going in to the direction of God. That's what needs to happen. And for them to get to that point, sometimes they need a voice in their life who will confront them. Okay? That's not usually fun. But if you have listened to them well and sought to understand them well, that gives you the privilege of confronting. Okay? And let me just say, again, there's not a lot of that that's done well. And a lot of it is because we haven't taken the hard time to listen well. So, just to kind of step that up a little bit more, what was the function of the priest in the Old Testament? What's the function of the priest in the Old Testament?
To bring people near to God.
All right, the priest in the Old Testament was the one who brought people near to God. And he did that essentially by speaking to God on behalf of man, or behalf of humans. What was the function of the Old Testament of prophets?
To warn you.
Until God.
To warn, to what? I heard something over here.
Give the answer.
To oftentimes give the answers. The prophets spoke from God to humans. Priests spoke on behalf of humans to God. Prophets spoke on behalf of God to humans. In our relationships, especially in the community of faith, we need both. Don't we? We need both. We need to have people in our lives who are compassionate, who are seeking understanding, but we also need people in our life, and ideally the same person could do both. But we need other people in our life who speak to us the clear word of God that we need to hear so that we can turn. And if you don't have somebody in your life or multiple people in your life like that, you're at a disadvantage in the Christian walk. Okay? People who love you enough to speak truth. In short, sometimes you will be a priest offering compassion. When you're learning how to listen, when you're learning how to understand, and you're engaging in this Christ-like mission of being a reconciler, at times you're going to be a priest offering compassion. Who does Scripture say are priests in the kingdom of Christ? Who we? Who is we?
The church.
All right, the church. If you are a follower of Jesus Christ, if you're a disciple of Jesus Christ, you're a priest who can fulfill that assignment. At other times, you will need to be a prophet, confronting the wrong in a person's life and calling him or her to repentance. But to get there, you need to understand them through listening and asking good questions. Okay? Do you have any questions here before I move into a little exercise?
I just think that you have to have, before you can be a good listener, you have to have the heart of God to love that person so much that even if they come back at you with excuses or lies or whatever, you can be wise, but compassionate too, but you must have love. So that turns towards you to work on yourself so that you can be a better listener.
You make a great point because to be the kind of priest we're talking about, the priests were from the tribe of Levi, right? You could be a Levite from the tribe of Levi and be a priest because that's your ancestry. But if you don't have a heart that goes with that, you're probably not going to be a very good priest. So you're right. We need to allow God to shape our hearts if we want to be priests. We need to have God shape our hearts if we want to be prophets. One of the things I love, especially about the prophet Jeremiah, it grieved him to have to say some of the things he said. He didn't take delight and say, "Woohoo, did you hear me tell those people they're headed to captivity? I love that." That's not what he said. It grieved him. He experienced the same things that they did. And so having the heart of God in doing all of this is an important piece. So I want us to practice. We've only got a few minutes left. I want you to give me what you might say, okay? Take all the things we've talked about, and I've condensed into 4 Wednesday nights about 3 years of study, okay? But do your best, all right? You're walking in the hallway on a Sunday morning, and you meet someone in the hallway and you ask him how he's doing. And he smiles and says, "I'm not quite myself these days. I don't know what's wrong." All right? Give me some. What are you going to do with that?
Tell me more about that.
Good. Tell me more about that. That's good.
Let's go have
All right.
coffee. Let's go have coffee and talk.
Let's go have coffee and talk. In a busy hallway where people are coming and going, and it sounds like this is probably something that they don't want to broadcast. Let's go find a quiet place right now, which may be coffee and talk. So what else? What might you say?
What's going on?
What's going on? Yeah. It may be physical. Okay? And so explore, but you're inviting the person into a deeper conversation. Let's don't ever be guilty in that situation. Someone saying, you know, I don't know what's going on. I just don't feel myself. Of saying, I'm so glad to hear it. Have a blessed day. Because you didn't listen. And that's what we're apt to do, isn't it? At times, we don't really listen. How you doing? Fine, fine. Everybody's fine. Good, good. Go. Bye. Or we say, I hope it gets better, but we don't go any farther. Be warmed and filled, yeah. Even if we're in a rush, and I often am, okay? Because I'm just taught, I'm either going to teach a class or I'm going from class to preach a sermon. I often have to say things like this. Let's talk about this later. Okay? Don't abandon people, I guess is what I'm saying. All right, let me give you another one. Someone comes and says, I think I'm about to lose my faith. How would you respond to that? I think I'm about to lose my faith. Go deeper than that.
How can I help?
How can I help? What questions are you having? That's always a good response. Tell me more. Okay, you can invite them to read the Bible with you. Okay, what are you losing faith in? What I hope you're learning as we've gone through these 4 weeks is that listening, really listening, takes effort. It takes effort. But you're going to make differences in people's lives when you do that. Now, there are going to be times, this is probably a good place to put it this morning. There are going to be times when you get into situations that I am over my head. Okay? I quickly got into this and now I'm over my head. What do you do in those situations?
Okay, help.
Okay, how do you do that? You've got somebody who's kind of laying their guts out to you. How do you get help in the moment?
Lloyd said he gets on your. I was about to say, I think I know somebody who you could talk to.
Well, and I can be a resource, but what you want to be able to do is just to be honest in those moments and say, you know what? I love you and I care about what's going on, but I feel like I'm kind of in over my head right now.
But I'll go with you.
But I'll go with you.
Don't
And
abandon.
we'll fight. Don't abandon it. Exactly. Okay. So don't try to do things you're not prepared to do. All right. There are resources available. Just as David said, don't abandon people. Again, we've talked about things that take months, that people work on for months and years to be effective at. I hope it's a beginning point for us, as I said in the very first class period, to be ambassadors for Jesus Christ by the way that we value people enough to listen to them. Okay? Valuing people enough to listen to them. Go be ambassadors for Christ. God bless you.